Hello everybody and welcome back to Elderberry Sprout. Today we're doing the final, installment of our series called Make a Book of Shadows with Me / Make a Book of Reflections with me. Today we're going to be actually doing the binding. So we're doing a new binding system that I've never tried before. It turns out really well though, so I'm excited to share it with you. Firstly, I have this piece of fabric. I painted it with 2 to 3 layers of PVA glue to make it really rigid so that it can hold its shape once it's holding all of the signatures, because we're not going to be sewing signatures into a rigid spine like a piece of cardboard. We're going to be sewing the signatures directly into this rigid piece of fabric. It's important to trim the edges here. This fabric was originally from a tablecloth that I had turned into a pair of pants, and this was an offcut from that, so it's nice to use up the stuff that I've already used multiple times. And of course you could turn these ends in instead of just cutting them off and leaving them a little bit raw, but since it was already painted with PVA, I know it's not going to be, unraveling or anytime soon. So you can see that there's a little bit of space, about 1 inch on each side of overlap that we don't really need. But here's the spine that we're going to be using to glue to the spine of the book. We're going to glue the fabric to this piece of cardboard and this cardboard to this curved spine. You can see there's a curve in both of these, so I'm going to match the curve to the curve so I get some good adherence and good surface area. And I tried to size these signatures so that they fit well within the spine, and I think I did a pretty good job of that. Since there are 5 different signatures, it's now time for me to mask out where I want each of the signatures to be bound in. I'm essentially going to be using this spine as a template to help me figure out where the holes are going to be poked through the fabric. So I'm really just choosing 3 different arbitrary lines for the top, bottom, and center. I am using a 3-hole pamphlet stitch. So if you're familiar with that, it means that you need 3 holes for each different signature. And because there's 5 signatures, the way that I'm spacing it out is I just draw a line down the center of my template and then divide each of those sides into 2 extra holes. So I guess I'm dividing it into 3 spaces. That way there's space on the side and space in between each of the 2 signatures on each side of the center. 4, 5. And then I just extend those lines downward so that I can know where all of my holes need to be punched. I do really like using this 3-hole pamphlet stitch, so that's why I decided to do 3. You can do 5, you can do way more than that too, but I do like the 3. I feel like it goes pretty fast and is pretty solid. Here I'm just punching holes in my template so that I can trace the holes out onto the fabric after all the holes are punched. It's nice to have a little mat that you can poke into without destroying your table. There's my holes all punched. Let's see if we can get that transferred onto the fabric. So to do this, I used a really juicy pen to try to get it to leak through onto the fabric, and I was pretty successful. I did have to darken the dots a little bit though. Yeah, I was really going around to try to make sure I was getting full contact with the fabric behind that. I do really like this pen as well, but it's my last one. Once it's used up, I'm done trying to fully move over to fountain pens all the time. And like a ding-dong, I went and moved the template, so I had to realign it to get the bottom layer of dots on there. There we go, victory. So now we're pretty much getting prepared to get these signatures bound in. So here's my little book binding kit I made. It's just a box of stuff. It's mainly big leather sewing needles, some beeswax, some string, and an awl. Which I didn't even use the awl for, or this awl at least, in this project, but this is a really nice one that I do like quite a bit. You can use whatever needles you want, but I do like to use thicker, like leather working needles. I like to use a small one here. Nice and sharp. And as far as color is concerned, I just had this one piece of DMC floss that was already taken apart, so I'm like, oh, I'll just use up the rest of this color. And if I need more, I'll grab more. When I measure out my string, I like to do it in a way where there's 5 lengths of the book for each signature. So 4, 5, and then I cut it. And you'll need one of those for each signature, so I need 5 of these strings all together. This is a little bit of overkill. You don't really need to have 5 links, but I always feel safer having a little bit of extra wiggle room. And there's all sorts of ways to use a scrap string as well, so. And there we go, there's all 5 of my strings. Once you have the strings all cut to the right size, it's nice to beeswax them. So I had this little chunk of beeswax. I like to coat my strings probably 3 or 4 times, and I always go back and do the ends super well. Because that's what you're threading through your needle. So it's nice to have your ends be pretty solid. And I'm sure you can see how much more rigid it is already, just the way it's moving around. It's not all slinky, it's kind of more solid. So this doesn't only add to the structural integrity of the binding, but it also makes it easier to work with because there's more structure in the string itself. I wish you could hear the squeaky noise from the beeswax. It's actually really satisfying. This is one of my favorite processes. If you do need beeswax, you don't have any chunks, I actually sell chunks of beeswax for this purpose on my website too. Okay, now it's officially time to bind. We've got our signatures here. The first step is going to be making sure that your signatures are aligned the way that you want them. So I like to use either little clips or paper clips. Whatever you have is totally fine. Just anything that will hold your papers together. And you do want them to not be completely flat. You want them to have a bit of that curve in them so that when you're punching the holes, they're all aligned directly on the actual crease on the paper. You don't want them to shift around too much. So there's that first signature. And the reason we made that template in the first place is so that we can have it aligned properly with the pages and the book itself. So there's a lot of different ways you can punch the holes in signatures, but one of the ways I like to do it is just use the same template and then punch holes next to where the lines are. Oh, and I forgot to say, here I ended up doing the bottom row a little bit lower, so I needed to readjust the line for where the holes should actually be punched. There we go, and I'm just using the needle that I'm going to be sewing this with to punch the holes. You can also use an awl, that's totally fine. They do have these tools where you can rest your signature in this like groove, and that allows for you to punch the holes while it's at a 45-degree angle and resting somewhere instead of like maybe punching it into your hand, which is something I thought, you know, I've been close to doing in the past. So that's a much safer way to go about doing that. And here I'm just clipping up the rest of the signatures. I got these little tiny baby paper clips at the Dollar Tree at one point. I don't know if they still sell them there. I will say the hinges tend to give out on these little guys, but they're so darn cute. I just want to use them whenever I can. The paper clips do work really well as well. Yeah, one of the side effects of having a whole bunch of different types of paper is that or sizes of paper is that they'll shift around. So it is kind of a pain if you have a tiny piece of paper in the center of a signature and it shifts around a little bit. So gotta be pretty careful with those things. Unless you're okay with imperfection, then it doesn't really matter. But here in this last signature, I did encounter a little bit of concern with having things move around a little bit. So I tried to be very careful to keep it in the same place. And here's our last little clip. Now they're all clipped and ready to sew in. So to actually begin the sewing, I like to choose a color. I like to alternate too. I think I have 2 different colors of string here, so I go from the brighter to the darker to the brighter to the darker. To get your string to stay, I actually end up threading the needle through the tail and tightening it on, so that way it doesn't get, the needle doesn't unthread itself. You can be a little bit lazier if you do it that way. Ah, we're officially getting started. So for the 3-hole pamphlet stitch, I like to start in the center. So you start in the center of the book, pull from the center outward, and then we're going to be doing the same thing with the fabric. So we're going from the inside of the book to the outside of the fabric, and then coming back through the outside of the fabric to the inside of the book. So then you have to make sure you're doing it through the right hole. So yeah, there's the first hole. And we're going to come back through the outside of that fabric, and then come back inside to the top part of the book. Through the peak of the mountain. And I did end up pulling the tail from the inside of the book out by accident, so I will have to rethread that afterwards, but I show you guys the binding process again on the second signature, just to make sure you guys are familiar with how to do this. And that one goes a little bit smoother. It's really interesting sewing through fabric instead of sewing through something more rigid like cardboard. So it's all a learning process, you know. But anyway, once you come to the inside of the book, you go out the bottom hole and then back in through the center hole. And at this point, I have to make sure that everything's aligned properly. And yeah, floppy fabric's a little tough. And going back through the center. And now, because I had lost my original tail, I have to re-thread my needle onto the original tail that I lost to lace it back through that center. And an important part of lacing through the center hole right before you're about to tie this off is it's useful to make sure that each of the strings that's coming back in through the center hole is on opposite sides of that string that's going down the length of the center of the signature. Because that way when you're tying the knot, so you see here, the existing string was on the left, and now I punched the hole, or I punched this string to go through the hole on the right side. Tightening it is very important. Of course, check the other side, make sure everything's snug and nothing's wrinkled in a weird way. And then, yeah, tighten it accordingly. But now that your strings are on opposite sides, you can actually tie the string and it will hold that center string in place as well. So it just makes everything a little bit more solid. I do like the contrast of this orange string on this dark green paper. I think it looks kind of cool. I don't know, whenever I see dark green and orange, it kind of gives me like an army or like post-apocalyptic color vibe for me anyway. And now it's time to trim these little tails off. And you of course can leave these as well and add charms to them. I tend to like my books to be a little bit more straightforward though, so there we go, first signature fully bound into the fabric. So let's repeat this process one more time for those of us who aren't too familiar. Yeah, and here's another important part, is to actually press everything down to make sure that your signatures lie flat. I'm just using a bone folder on my desk to do that. Signature 1 achieved. Okay, this one goes a little smoother. And you can use other flosses. You don't have to use DMC floss. That's just what I use because I have a huge collection of it. I know ideally you would use waxed linen thread because linen fibers are just way longer than cotton fibers are. So from a structural perspective, it's more efficient and stronger. But this is my own personal book, and I'm not too worried about it. And honestly, after waxing the thread, it gets so much stronger. Oh, one little thing I did differently this time is I added a little slip knot a little slip knot loop so that I don't pull that first tail all the way through the book. So that is something I just figured out is a good system for me, so I don't need to worry about keeping my thumb on top of that string the whole time. So it'll actually hold itself in place there. Yeah, and I didn't end up punching holes through this signature, so I'm doing that now. I just love this little kitty girl. I wonder what color I'm going to color her in. But there you go. You can see that little loop just holds that knot in place. I was very happy that that worked out well. Now I'm just aligning all my holes and sewing through. It's honestly a lot easier to handle the fabric spine portion now that there is one signature already lined up on it. It has some structure to hold its shape. And since I've already explained this process, I'll just leave you guys to watch this, and I'll chat with you when this is done. Sorry I'm a little bit out of frame for this. You can see untying that loop worked really well. And now I can just put the last string in and tie it off. And of course, always tighten. And there is a right and wrong way to go about tightening your string. Make sure that if you are coming from the bottom up, that that string is being pulled upwards. And if you have the original string that was from the center going to the top, make sure you're pulling that one downwards. It's just essentially making sure you don't split your papers in half through having too much tension going in the wrong direction. And there we go, signature 2 all done. And now that we've done 2 signatures slowly, here's a fast signature being done. It's much more satisfying to watch quickly. I do really like how this spine is turning out, the orange on orange action. This is one of the annoying parts of having a tiny piece of paper in the center of a signature, is you have to make sure you actually get it underneath all the strings. There we go, that one's done. 3 out of 5, not too bad. You see there's a little flap of fabric on each side. Let's see what it looks like when it's done. There we go, all 5 strings. Oh, I love how that's looking. I kind of want to keep the book looking like that now. You can see I'm already enamored with the fact that it's staying way more open. So I'm liking this idea so far already. And now it's finally time for us to glue our spine / template onto our signatures. Or I guess our bound signatures. Our actual spine, I don't know, there's like 3 spines in this book. There's a fabric spine, this like template sub-spine, and then the actual spine on the outside of the book. So we're combining the sub-spine to the fabric spine. And this is kind of a futzy process. I didn't do it completely evenly, and that's totally fine. This was like a first trial run, but I would have liked it to be a little bit more even, to be honest. Oh yeah, I forgot to press those signatures down, so I'm just adding some pressure there. And here I'm trying to make sure I have enough space for the ease of the pages to lay open. I don't know the exact right ratio of how much extra space I should allow, because I also don't want the signatures to pop out the end of the book. So it's kind of a, I don't know, it's kind of a futzy process figuring out the exact right amount of space to allow on each side. But I allowed a little bit of space on the back, and then I ended up allowing a lot of space on the front for things to move around. So you can see there I got probably about, what, ½ an inch on the back. And then on the front I end up leaving about probably 3/4 of an inch. Maybe even an inch. I think they left an inch on the front. So yeah, just make sure you have this glued really well. All of the spine needs to be glued super well because it's what's keeping everything together. The glue that I'm using is called Art Glitter Glue, and it grabs pretty quickly, which I absolutely love. So there's half of it glued on. And here is where I added a little bit more space in the front to make sure that it had that give room to play with. Because if you keep it too tight, if you're just gluing the fabric onto the back, and it pretty much stays flat. So you need to have a little bit of that space to have that room to play. As you can see, I'm not just gluing once, I'm gluing twice. Really needs to be adhered well. And this is kind of a difficult process to make sure everything is evenly spaced and, I don't know, not lopsided. So I'm sure I'll come up with a better system next time, but this works for now. And you can see there's a lot more space on this side than on the back. Boop, there you go. But altogether there is enough space for it to actually move around, which is nice. So I'm just cleaning up the fabric on the ends there. Here I'm just testing to see if it fits, and it does. Ah. And because this is my first time trying this system, I did want to cover the inside of the, I guess, the inside of the spine. I didn't really think about the fact that that part would be exposed. But then, yeah, there's like these little patches of my notes that I can see, or a little template. So I wanted to cover that up. So I ended up finding this piece of a coffee filter that I got from Corrigan, and I tucked that in there. Isn't that pretty? I think it's a really clever way to use weird old things. Like I have these, a whole set of coffee filters that are way too big, and my parents were just going to get rid of them. I'm like, oh, I can use them for something. So I think I'll end up using them in a similar way, just adding weird watercolory layers of color to it. Maybe that could be a fun project to do. Ooh, maybe a live stream I could just be painting things, making background collage fodder type stuff. But yeah, to achieve this, I just cut a triangle off, stuck it down in there in the center, because you're only going to be seeing the, first couple inches of it, and then flopped it over the back. It doesn't need to be super perfect or super beautiful or anything. I just wanted to not see the lines, essentially. And there we go. Not too shabby. Let's repeat that process. Find a little chunk and glue it in there. I've already got more ideas about how I'm going to do this the next time. There we go. I think it's about ready to glue in. Oh yes, this was some glitter from a spellwork page that I had already started on the inside of these signatures, which we'll get to flip through at the very end once we have this glued down. We're in the home stretch, guys. All we gotta do is glue this to the spine now. We're like almost done. Oh, and because these pockets were fabric and I just had one piece of fabric going across, I did have to glue that section to the spine. If you had decided to have two separate pockets, you wouldn't have had to do that step. And yes, I am adhering this like crazy. I'm adding so much glue. I do not want to lose my signatures out of this book, so I'm being super solid here. I'm sure there's other ways you could go about adding this spine in, but this is the one I thought of, so we're trying it out, and it's worked really well so far. I will say one of the tough parts about doing this type of spine is that you do have to add pressure to it and figure out a way to actually push down to make sure the glue is adhering. So I ended up just pushing along the sides, pushing on the corners to try to get in as much as I could, kind of breaking up some of the signatures and getting some pressure there. And then I held all of the signatures together as like a giant block and just pressed down really hard. And I held that for a little while. But yeah, here it's all glued in, and now let's add some decoration to the front. This is an Ouroboros stamp I had stamped, and I just wanted to glue that on the front as like, I don't know, the final step to this bookbinding process. It feels awesome to have done this with all of you guys. You've seen every step of the process, and now we're just like tying it all together with a big pretty bow. So there's that Ouroboros. Pretty simple, but I like it. And there we have it. The finishing touches, putting this little hand-stamped, this was black ink that I stamped on top of some tea-stained paper, and I got my little Ouroboros on the front of this book of reflections. So I like to call my book of reflections a book of reflections instead of a book of shadows, because I feel like it embodies not just the, you know, darkness, but also some of the light, and it's kind of like a book of mirrors, but it's also not just what's outside of you, it's also what's inside of you. So you can see reflections outside of you as well as inside of you. So I don't know. I really like that name, and that's what I'm going for this guy. So this is my next book of reflections. Let's do a flip through of all the pages. I know when I was binding these in, you guys would have seen at least some of the pages in here, but let's look at all of them now. So I'm really excited with this spine, like, ease in here. I think it'll really make it easier to work in the center of the book. You see how that lays flat there? Because of that extra give, the fact that the book can kind of separate from the spine a little bit. So just that little bit of room allows for, yeah, some real ease of motion when flipping through it. So I'm glad my, my theory is working, finally. But anyway, so this first one, I've got a little give thanks tag. We talked about all of the things that these pages are made out of to begin with, but I'm going to talk about the little additions I made. So this was a piece of paper that I had stamped a stamp on to test it, and I figured it was kind of neutral enough to use as a writing like background. So now I can write on that, write on that. I covered up some of the writing with other yellow, added a little bit of fabric, and cut this out into hexagons. Oh yeah, I used this little bee right here to make a pocket because I thought it fit so perfectly. I also found this tag, which has some just pretty sparkly ribbon on it. So that's living in there. Yeah, put some rickrack and some washi tape around to keep that on. Then here I put a little purple pocket. I used a crown stamp with some gold / light brown ink to stamp a little border around the edge there. Oh, and I used some light blue to make some cloud stamps there. I really like the cloud stamp I carved because you can invert it upside down but also keep it upright, and it looks like a cloud either way. So Excited with that one. Tea stain paper. Oh, so I was talking about how this was really bright green. I did tea stain it, or coffee dye it, with a stencil on top. So that's the beautiful pattern that I've got from that. I don't know if I'm going to anchor this on the side or leave it as like an open tuck, but that's what we got so far. All my little natural mushrooms and things. And once again, I don't know if I'm going to tuck that in or not, or glue it on the side. Left those guys empty. I covered up just a little bit of white up here with some black construction paper, just to keep it unified as like a dark page. I kind of liked these borders, so I left that. Oh, this was the other side of that hive page, and it had a whole bunch of information on it that I didn't want to like have to glue over, so I ripped it off, left just this little bit, and used a card that I thought was really pretty, but it had writing on the center of it, so I just glued over that, and you can see where the shiny part is and where the matte paper is that I can write on. So I did that on both sides. And this was a placemat. Like a very thin, vintagey paper placemat. So that's why it's that yellow color. The other side of that. And this is the other side of that calendar, and this is just a piece of gel printed tissue paper. And I might add more to this one, but I was just working with what I had, and I'm pretty happy with it. A little bit of writing. I might end up adding collage of whatever it is I'm actually writing about on that page. And look at that, staying completely open. You know, I actually want to show you the contrast. Okay, this is another junk journal I made. And do you see how the pages are standing up more? This at this angle, and this is roughly the center of the book. Yeah, that's the center of the book. I think this one has 3. No, here we go. That's the exact center. So just everything stays up like that. And this one lies so flat. So I definitely think this is going to be a solution as far as a binding system is concerned for me for a while, unless I figure out maybe I'll just glue the fabric instead of having it wrap around on that piece of the spine. I might just use the fabric as the inside here. And I feel like, oh, we got a little spider friend here. Hey, dude. Where do you want to go? Let's take you outside, honey. Come on, little guy. Over here. Thank you. Anyway, like I was saying, I might use the fabric as the actual liner page for the inside of the covers. That way, that's all it would be, is just that one piece of fabric on the inside. And I wouldn't have to deal with layering up multiple layers on the spine. Okay, and this next signature, this is a stamp that I carved. I carved it in this video up here, one of those corners. And I covered the center of the crystal ball with this metallic, I don't know, golden mirror-ish, kind of like contact paper stuff. Anyway, I like how that looks. And I like the kind of the chaos and the purple, and I think it's a good pairing there. So I tea stained this good piece of junk mail that I got that was on like good paper. And I taped some glued some scraps over the writing. Didn't do much there. Oh, so this was pretty boring. I did a little bit of stamping on the top. And then I made this little tuck. So this is some fabric dyed paper. It's kind of looks like avocado. And then this was just from a magazine. And I thought the pink paired really well. And I was trying to use just what was already around me. And this is a little paper clip that has a bit of ribbon on it. And this is not actually a ribbon, it's a piece of this same fabric. So it kind of matches, but it's like just the string of it. So I don't know, it's a nice way to unify this project a little bit. Then here we've got my good morning and wherever the other side is. And good night affirmations that I had for a long time. And on this side, I put this little pocket. This is also gel printed. I've been experimenting with jelly plates so much. It's just great. Anyway, these were envelopes that had been water damaged. So I've been using them to pick up the edges of my jelly plate. And yeah, so I turned that into a little pocket. I did ink the side to make it stand out like a little bit more, or show up. And this is just an offcut. You can see it's 2 different pieces of paper that I just glued together. I can write on that if I want to. Again, with that little bit of ribbon. I think that was actually an offcut from the other piece, so I'm even using the scraps of my scraps. We've got green. We've got my kitty. I love my kitty. Don't think I did much here. Yeah, I left the rest of the signature pretty simple. Yeah, and then just use more of that gel plate tissue paper to collage this. I do like using the tissue paper because it doesn't make things so much thicker, but it also adds a full-on layer of color. But sometimes you can see a little bit through it, which, I don't know, it's kind of nice to have the story of what this thing used to be mixed in as well. Oh, nice and flat. Oh, I'm loving this. So I did reinforce this back here, which was kind of peeling up with some, actually it was plastic washi tape. I ordered it and I thought it was going to be paper, but it's plastic. Oh well, I'll use it anyway. Added some more tea stain paper there. Once again with the tissue paper, I tissue papered over my instructions for my chair. This is some tissue paper that had some writing on it already, so I think I might just leave that because it's actually really insightful writing. I found this in a book that I bought, and it was like some reflections from the previous owner about the book and what it was talking about, so it's a little bit of notes about philosophy, which I appreciate. Then I did kind of patch up this corner, which was falling apart, to make it nice and square. And then I got two little cards in here. So this is a stamp I carved. I just glued that on the front. And this is that same fabric from this little pocket. I just stapled it on the top there after I punched a hole to lace it through. And this card is nice and sturdy, and it was originally a like sample of, I think, upholstery or maybe wallpaper. Yeah, it's like from a company who makes wallpapers, and I got a stack about that big of this exact pattern all on cards. So I've been trying to use those up as journaling cards. And then there's just some more of this on the back there. And this was a little card that I got from the earrings that I purchased, and I figured I'd write a little note about them. Boop, boop. This is the table of contents page, and I just covered up the table of contents with this little stampy, I don't know, title, header type stamp. And then I watercolored over the actual table of contents just because I wanted it to be, I don't know, to look a little different. I can still read through it, but also it just adds like another layer of dimension. So I don't know. I kind of like that one. It's kind of fun, and it's also really beautiful paper, so I enjoy doing the watercoloring. Some tea stained paper. Oh, and this little flip out page, which was from San Francisco, I added this little piece of ephemera that I got from a company who sent it to me. That was from the Grabby box. And then more tea stain. Yeah, you can see I did the pink all the way over. I really just like that little pop of color. Maybe this one was feeling a little boring, so I like added some pink in there. And here we go. I've got another journaling card. This was just a manila folder with a little piece of ribbon, and I used that same pink watercolor just around the edge because I didn't want to get out my distress inks for that. I've got these little brown construction paper, I don't know, grommets, paper savers, I don't know what they're called, but anyway, I try to make those with brown paper whenever I have scraps, so I just like hole punch them. But I ran out because they take forever to make. There's got to be a system of making these more efficiently. Maybe there's like a punch I can buy for them. But anyway, and this is a beautiful set of napkins that I have. I've been making a lot of napkin tags just because they're so beautiful that I pretty much just use the napkins. And then I drew a little bit of a border around it because I didn't want to sew it. Because it's chilly, I didn't want to go to my sewing machine. And then I've got a little ticket stamp down there. This is a little tuck that I put in the corner. And this is the same ephemera that came in that Grabby box. And in this signature, I actually added some stuff. This is a bag from a company I bought some crystals and some Palo Santo from. So I loved their stamp. It has like a little lion, and it's called, Dandelion Crystals and Jewelry. So I kind of, I opened up the top and the bottom of the bag to make like two little, I don't know, bag slash like little pockets I can put stuff in. Beautiful, just left that like that. Left that like that, left that like that. Oh, here we go. So this part of the permaculture page, I used some old recipe cards to glue over this, just because this is what was available around me. I could grab it from at arm's length, so I just threw it on there. I wanted to tie in the pink, so I added more of this gel print tissue. Oh, I added the same green offcuts. Because actually I made a 4-column notebook for farmers market logging, and these are the offcuts from that because it was the paper I was working with was really large and I needed it to be smaller. And yeah, so I used the offcuts here, which is nice. So I got a little pocket there, added that little bit of ribbon with gold. Got my lovely lady here. And I did add a little bit of tape there because this part started to peel up. So a little bit of washi tape. Yeah, and I've got another tiny little tuck pocket. Depending on what I use this page for, I might actually add some more detail here that'll like pop out on this side, but it really depends on what I end up talking about once I get here. And I just left this side of it, the inland northwest permaculture convergence. I left that just like that so I remember it. Remember it for next year, hopefully. Or I guess it'll be this year. So these were those little cuts that were in the page. I got some washi tape that was pretty neutral and it blends in, but it's also like a little bit ornate because it matches with the tones of the general book, which I appreciate. Looks good with that too. Yeah, and this part was the original top of the bag. So the other side, this part I opened up because this was the stamp at the bottom and then this was the actual bottom of the bag with just some, you know, pinking shears. So kind of looks like a normal bag opening. It's a little bit more zigzaggy, but here we go. We're in the last signature and it's still staying flat except for this bag, but that's just kind of the bag's fault. That's not that's not the binding issue. So I used some tissue paper here to cover that up. I wanted a little bit of writing space on that page, so I just used a scrap paper there. Oh, and this is something I'm actually working on. It's some spell work that I'm going to record, but I haven't recorded it yet, so I'm just leaving that there. But yeah, that all has to do with the spell work. Let's see, what did I do here? Oh, I covered up the writing with some scrap paper. Oh, covered up the writing. I put a little moon stamp there. Oh, and here's where I got the trick-or-treat bag in. You can see this side's much more orange than this side. I kind of dulled this down because this orange was a little bit obtrusive. So yeah, I dulled that down with some brown pens, just kind of like rubbed it in to make it less obnoxious. But yeah, I can put little trick-or-treat surprises in there. I just stapled a little ruffle up there with that same ribbon. And this page, for some reason, I'm surprisingly in love with. Like, I don't know why I like this so much, but I really do. So I used this eyeball stamp that I'd carved all along the like the top side to cover up the staples from stapling this on. I just have this watercolor sticker, which is like slightly iridescent pinky. Yeah, because I like to do watercolor stickers whenever I find label stickers at the thrift store. Then I've got a fairy, and these other fairies who somebody had drawn on. So it's like, oh, we're all serious. Tee! And here we've got the center of the last signature. This I actually spent a lot of time working on. So this is that Love the Land paper. I, as you can tell, used a lot of gel printing, but then also had some scraps here. The part that I wanted to really focus on was the eye design, because my mom had drawn that when she was just like on the phone. It was one of those things where, I don't know if you guys ever did this back in the day, maybe more so than now, but when you're on the phone, you just doodle or take notes. So that's something she had doodled, and I thought it was really pretty. So like how that turned out. I also like how it looks with this little guy. That was from Corrigan the Crone, so I just put that in the corner because I felt like it needed something else. I have a couple little washi stickers there just for decoration. Oh yeah, you can kind of see the writing from behind here, but I did cover up the rest of this like little tree with some more paper so I can actually write on it. Left this roughly the same. Oh, so on the back I covered up the writing and then I used that same stamp. And there you go. Did the same thing with the tissue paper there. And that brings us to the back of the journal. So altogether, I'm really happy with all of the additions I made, how this was put together. I am loving that. Like, look at that. Look at all the room. Oh my gosh, I'm so excited. I'm so stinking excited. I'm gonna be able to have so much room to work on this. Look, completely flat. Okay, well this one's just because this photo's really, really rigid. But these lay so flat. I'm so excited about it. Oh, man. Anyway, I hope this inspired you to make your own book of shadows and to experiment with different binding techniques. This one is one I've never done before, but I'm very happy with the outcome. Next time I'm going to make it a little less uneven, but it's a proof of concept. It definitely works, which is nice. Yeah, I hope this inspires you to dig in, make your own journal if you weren't already doing it with me in these videos. Just know that these books, they're easier to make than buying a really fancy book and then feeling the weight of like, oh, I spent, you know, $75 on this leather-bound journal. This is a much more approachable way to get into reflection, and plus you could also just like use scraps, use whatever you have, and then just write your thoughts in it. I don't know, it's a lot less daunting, but also there's layers of meaning that you can bake into the making of it. So thank you so much for watching, everybody, and I hope you have a magical day. Bye.